good to go? Okay, cool. Hey everyone, how are you? Good evening. Thank you for coming out to my presentation tonight. My name is John Lazaro. I'm an author and photographer from Long Island, and I'm here to present my latest book, which is A Vanishing New York, Ruins Across the Empire State. I've been a photographer for about 8 years or so. I got into this particular subject matter, which many of you, or some of you may know, is urban exploration. In other words, what I like to do for fun is I sneak into abandoned buildings and I take pictures of what's inside. And I was able to turn this into a book where I traveled all over the state of New York and documented various ruins, historical spots throughout each of New York's 11 regions. And what I found is that each region of New York essentially tells a story about the overall infrastructure of the state. So for instance, we look at the Finger Lakes region, where we are now. You see a lot of remnants of the railroad industry. The Long Island region where I'm from, you see, it was once known as the mental health capital of the world, so you see a lot of remnants of old asylums, state hospitals. In fact, 3 of the largest ones in the nation were actually in Long Island, and I'll cover a few of them today. So yeah, this particular book project started when I finished my first book, which is called The Walls Still Talk, A Photographic Journey Through Kings Park Psychiatric Center. I finished that in 2019. That's when I kind of fell in love with urban exploration, and I wanted to travel more over the state of New York, and that's where I came up with the idea for A Vanishing New York. So just to give you an idea of how New York State is laid out via region, the green region here is the Finger Lakes region, and here we are in Monroe County, and I'm from Huntington, which is on the North Shore of Long Island here, and these are the different regions which I'll go through. In doing this book, I visited about 43 different historical sites. I won't go through all of them today, but I picked a few from each one that were pretty interesting, and that's what I will present to you today. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, there's a lot of material that I'm going to cover. Please, feel free to, ask. It takes the pressure off me in a way. So, with that, we'll begin with the Finger Lakes region. So I'm sure many of you know Rochester at one point had a subway. It was known as the Rochester Industrial and Rapid Transit Railway. It opened to the public in December of 1927. Ridership peaked during World War II due to gasoline rationing, but declined by the 1950s as plans were developed for a system of expressways in and around Rochester. These are just some archival photos, not included in the book, but just for the sake of the presentation, I wanted to give you an idea. This is Broad Street, so it's right outside the library. And this is inside that tunnel. So when construction on the Eastern Expressway, which is I-490, when that was completed, passenger service on the Rochester subway ended on June 30th, 1956. So the subway itself operated for only 30 years. And the western end of the line continued to be used for freight service until about 1976. So basically, city planners, when they were thinking about the idea to build a subway in Rochester, that started about 1910. What they didn't realize is that how popular the automobile would become. So as they were planning the subway, more and more locals started to buy automobiles. So the subway was a nice idea at first, but it wasn't utilized to its fullest potential. And that's just another shot inside the subway. This is under the library across the street. So if you look at the far end, that is part of the subway. And then if you were to go left off the screen, that's Broad Street. And the last remaining subway car that was used as part of the Industrial Rapid Transit Railway, that's in the Genesee Railroad Museum right now. That's subway car 60. So not included in the book, but just interesting enough for the presentation that I wanted to include it to show you guys. Okay. So next stop in the Finger Lakes region is the Lehigh Valley Railroad Manchester Roundhouse. So, and this is located in Manchester, so it's about 30 minutes outside the city here. The story behind this particular location is that as diesel locomotives came into regular use, the Lehigh Valley Railroad constructed the Manchester Roundhouse in 1916 with the purpose of providing me see. Is this better? Oh, thank you. Okay, sorry about that. All right. Back to, yes, so it was a 62,000 square foot roundhouse, had 30 bays, one of the largest rail support facilities in the country. This yard, it served as a division point where trains changed crews and were reconfigured for the next destination. So similar to how airline hubs operate today, that's what railroad roundhouses are. It's just, it was easier to bring in cars and then move them out. So if you look at this, this historical photo down here, there was, so in between the half U shape, there was like a turnstile where cars would, you know, go on that, like that little pivot, and they would go into an open freight car bay. And then, you know, they would come out, locomotives too. And just another picture of the inside. So each pillar, there's a bay where the cars would come in between each one, and there were 30 of them. So this is looking east, and the other one's looking west. As far as I know, no. It's still, it looks like this as of last year. I revisited it, you know, just to do some additional photography. By the 1970s, industrial and commercial development was no longer concentrated in central locations, but dispersed regionally. So the interstate highway system allowed for the flexibility of trucking to bring cargo to more dispersed locations. So that's why, like, you see the railroad industry start to decline, and instances like the Rochester subway, like the Manchester Roundhouse, sort of, you know, just grow out of use. Okay. Last stop in the Finger Lakes region. This was actually one of my favorite photos that I got to take doing this project. And it wasn't initially a spot that I wanted to visit when doing this book. It was actually an impromptu stopover after visiting some family in Rochester on the way home. But this is Jackson Sanatorium in Dansville, which is just outside Ithaca, still in the Finger Lakes region. But the unique story behind this place is that it begins in 1854 when Dr. Caleb Jackson opens this institute as, known at the time as Our Home on the Hillside. Tuberculosis hospitals, so there's a disambiguation between the two terms, and you also hear sanitarium. Yeah. Is this better? Okay. All right. Sorry about that, guys. This particular facility was more of a health spa. I'll cover actual like tuberculosis sanatoriums like throughout the presentation, but yeah, that is one of the few examples. Yeah, yeah. And just a quick archival photo of the granola that was invented there. They're both one and the same. Yeah, a sanitarium, that's more of like a health resort. A sanatorium is more of a tuberculosis hospital. It was just known as Jackson Sanatorium at one point during this facility's operation. It later like turned into a hotel at one point, served as various health resorts over a period of time, and it closed on Labor Day 1971. Okay. So going to the Long Island region, where I'm from, So one of the first, or actually the first stop I did on this region and the project was Kings Park Psychiatric Center, which is about 20 minutes or so from where I live. This building of Kings Park Psychiatric Center, it's called Building 93. It was the tallest structure on Long Island at the time it was built, before it was replaced by the Stony Brook Medical Center, which is actually nearly off the screen on the left-hand side. You can kind of see it where my laser pointer is. So it's almost like the two buildings are sort of paying an homage to one another. But Building 93, which is probably the most prolific building on the grounds, if you drive through or walk through, it's actually State Park, so you're perfectly free to do so. It was designed by New York State architect William Haggard, who also built the Alfred E. Smith Building in Albany, and more famously, Attica State Prison. Kings Park Psych Center was in operation from 1885 until it closed in 1996. So its history spans 111 years. And it initially opened as a branch of the Kings County Lunatic Asylum in Flatbush. So that's how the town Kings Park got its name, not from the hospital, but from Brooklyn, since Brooklyn is known as Kings County. So just going through Kings Park still. This is another building, interior of a building on the grounds. It's Building 90. It was a clerical building. There were a lot of business offices there. Chaplains had an office there. The director of the hospital had an office there. This is what it looked like inside back in 2018. I actually used this photo for the first book that I had published. And I liked it so much, I just included it in this book too. If there's any photographers here, when I do photography, I like to set up my shots in terms of geometry. Like I like to shoot symmetrically or asymmetrically. So in this case, if you look at and I use a higher f-stop too, which means everything in the shot is in focus. And I like to define entire spaces as a whole rather than focusing on maybe a small object in a room. But you can see down the hallway, that's the focal point. I like how the street art and the staircase sort of balance each other out. This is a day room in Building 22. So just to give you an idea of what a day room is in a hospital. So if you've seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where all the patients and Jack Nicholson's character are hanging out, playing games, that's essentially a day room. So that's this is what it looks like about 23 years after the hospital closed as a result of deinstitutionalization. What's unique about this particular floor, so Building 22 is a four-floor building. This is the only floor that has barred windows, and that's because the most violent patients at Kings Park were housed on this top floor. It was part of an admissions ward, so basically what that means is if you were a patient being admitted to the hospital, you were housed here for a period of 20 to 30 days, assessed based on what your needs were, either kept here or moved to a different facility on the hospital grounds. And this is just the breezeway, so it's connecting Building 22 to Building 7, which was a medical surgical building. And it's basically just a long corridor allowing for maximum sunlight and airflow through the building. You can see here, there's like some green coming in through the window. That's actually not graffiti. That's plants and vines just growing through, and that's the sunlight coming through. I shot this particular photo early in the morning, so I kind of captured the sunlight at the right angle. Okay. Next stop, Long Island region. This is the Fairchild Republic factory. Basically, what this particular facility did is it made fighter jets. So during World War II, the company produced over 9,000 P-47 Thunderbolt fighters, which were used in the European theater, the F-84 Thunderjets in Korea, and the 105 Thunder Chiefs in Vietnam. And due to a decline in building contracts, this factory closed in 1987, so the same year I was born. When it closed, all the archival records were destroyed except for a single document, which was a purchase order for a block of P-47s. So that document actually sits at the Cradle of Aviation Museum in Garden City on Long Island. This is just an archival photo of what the main processing floor looked like. So this room, this was probably taken sometime during the Vietnam War, based on the aircraft that are being built. another room in the factory. This is probably just an office room, and you can see how structurally unstable it was. Most of the roof has caved in. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of personal risk. Yeah, yeah. And many of these spots I visited alone, so I guess the risk is that much greater. But yeah, I always when I do visit these spots, I always tell someone where I'm going and check it in with them at various points. But yeah, and this was also there's a few towns away from where I live, so it was the comfort level was a little more there for me. So. But yeah, there's it's definitely like in the back of my mind when I'm there, just being safe, and of course there've been many times where I'm like, yeah, I can't, not the right day for this. So yeah. Okay. Still on Long Island, this is Camp Hero. This radar tower, it was once part of a mother station to a network of smaller radar towers situated all over the East Coast. It was said that this collection of radar towers afforded the United States an extra attack. What's more interesting is the theory of the Montauk Project, which was the basis of the television show Stranger Things, which was inspired by Camp Hero. And the legend behind that is that experiments took place beneath the radar tower in secret laboratories connected by a tunnel system. Children were allegedly taken from the streets, kept below ground, where scientists performed mind control experiments on them. So that urban legend essentially inspired the show Stranger Things, which was popular on Netflix and whatnot. But yeah, that's Camp Hero. It's part of a state park in Montauk, which is all the way at the eastern end of Long Island. You can visit it. This part is gated off, but there's a camping site nearby. It's a pretty interesting spot to visit if you're if you ever travel out down there. And last stop on the Long Island region, this is the Nepegue Stilt House. So to give you an idea of where it is geographically, South Shore of Long Island, Southern Fork. If you're driving out towards Montauk, you have Amagansett, Nepegue, and then Montauk at the far end. So this home, which is on stilts, it was abandoned in 1998 as per town order stating that due to a non-functional septic system, this residence could no longer be occupied. So when it was built, originally in the 1950s, it sat on the beach 100 feet from the water. When I took this photo during 2020, it's sitting in about 30 feet in Nepegue Bay. Yeah, so Nepegue Bay is not landlocked, but it's not right on the ocean. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. That I'm not sure. I think if you see a lot of the homes in that area and other coastal homes on Long Island, a lot of them are sort of propped up just because of the tides coming in. Yeah. Okay. New York City region. This is what we know, I guess, urban explorers like myself know as Skull Silo. It's actually part of the Greenpoint Terminal Market, which is a huge industrial manufacturing plant. It made rope way back during the late 1800s, and it's in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. The story of how this particular building came to be, it was part of a larger facility. But around 5:30 a.m. on May 2nd, 2006, a mysterious 10-alarm fire broke out within the terminal market, and it took about 400 firefighters, some 36 hours, and 9 million gallons of water to fully extinguish the blaze, making it the most extensive operation by the FDNY since 9/11. So this was one of the two structures that remained after the fire. So it gets its name Skull Silo because the two these pieces of concrete that came out from the building or fell out, some street artists went and painted a skull around it. So they kind of used that as a canvas. So for me, it's pretty neat. The story behind that is pretty interesting. That's why I included it in the book. Next spot in New York City is Seaview Hospital. So we talked about sanatoriums versus sanitariums before. This is considered, or once was considered, a sanatorium. It treated tuberculosis patients way back during the early 1900s. And actually a lot of the pioneering research that was done to treat tuberculosis was actually undertaken at Seaview Hospital. So the antibiotic streptomycin, which is used to combat TB, that was invented at Rutgers University. But the research done at Seaview Hospital made doctors experiment with something called isoniazids, which are acids that make the antibiotic more effective. That was undertaken at Seaview Hospital. So it's pretty significant in overall medical history. It's also one of the favorite spots that I visited doing this project. Not so much like the fine art or the photography, but more of like what was left over. When you visit a lot of these spots, they're often decayed. There's not a lot left over, but in this case, there was a lot of old equipment left over from decades and decades ago. In fact, if you look at this particular photo, notice on the walls over here, you see these little turquoise objects sticking out from the wall. It's kind of hard to see. These are actually medallions, and this is part of a mosaic tiling that was all over the porches and outside of the hospital. So these were constructed back when the hospital was constructed, and they were seen as aiding the healing process. So patients that were suffering from TB, they would spend a lot of time on porches. They would spend a lot of time on porches like this with access to sunlight and fresh air. Back before antibiotics came into effect, access to sunlight, fresh air, that was seen as a cure to TB. And when I say medical equipment, this is just a room in that patient pavilion in Seaview Hospital. This is just an old gurney with a crutch, probably some sort of restraints that are on the bed here. Typical patient ward in the hospital, all the way at the end here. These are wooden wheelchairs. Probably date back to the 1940s, 1950s. Okay, going into the Hudson Valley region, you see a lot of remnants of institutions and estates in this region. So for instance, here's one. This is Camp LaGuardia. It's in the town of Chester, New York. And the history of Camp LaGuardia dates back to 1918 when New York State purchased 300 acres of lands in the town of Chester, it's Orange County, to build a prison for young women following a sharp spike in female criminal activity in New York City during and after World War I. So in 1934, Gray Court Women's Prison, it was converted into Camp Gray Court, which was a work camp for homeless men by then New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. It was renamed Camp LaGuardia in 1935, and the facility was imagined to be a self-sustaining by providing rehabilitative work environment for homeless men. So this is what it looks like as of 2021 when I took this picture on the lower right-hand corner. That's back when it was active. So it's closed today. In fact, back when New York City had its most recent mayoral race, Curtis Lewa, who was the candidate from Staten Island, he actually proposed reopening this to deal with the current homeless problem in the city. So you can kind of see remnants back of when it was a prison for women. This is just a typical ward where the residents would live. This is what remains of the dining hall at Camp LaGuardia. Typical office wing in the main building here, so this structure here. Okay, so another favorite spot of mine. This is Letchworth Village, not to be confused with Letchworth State Park. This actually used to be a hospital for treating child patients suffering from mental retardation and other physical ailments. One question I get asked a lot is, have you ever encountered any ghosts when doing this type of photography? The answer is no. I wish I had, but I will say that all of the places I've been to, this is probably what I would say is the most creepiest, probably the most sad, just knowing a lot of the history behind this place. If anyone remembers back during the 70s when Geraldo Rivera had the Willowbrook scandal that came out, basically what that was is Willowbrook was a hospital similar to Letchworth Village on Staten Island where children that were housed there suffering from mental retardation and other physical disabilities, they were maltreated, and not so much by the staff, but there was a lot of systemic abuse because the state couldn't properly fund facilities like that. So you see a lot of overcrowding, 10, 15 patients to one staff member. So the conditions there were very poor. So when Geraldo Rivera went in and exposed this during the 1970s, that's essentially when deinstitutionalization started. So that's the closing of hospitals like this all over the country. So Letchworth Village was actually the other facility named in that expose. You can actually go on YouTube today and see a video of that. You can actually see Letchworth Village being named in that expose. The governor at the time visiting and being like, what is going on here? Why is this like this? So this closed 1995, 1996. Letchworth Village, so it's in Fields, New York. So Hudson Valley region, it's right off the Palisades Parkway. So if you're heading north, you can actually see it when you drive through the hamlet of Fields. This is just the typical office room in the medical surgical building at Letchworth. So that's this particular building here. Typical boys' dormitory, day room in Letchworth. This is what the morgue used to be, or what it looks like today. This was taken in the medical surgical building at the facility. Okay, next stopover in the Hudson Valley region. So when I talk about estates, this is the Brandywine estate. Built in 1909, it was a 49-room Tudor-style mansion. It belonged to a prominent railroad businessman. After he passed away, the estate went through several owners and a massive renovation before being converted into a nursing home. It was then abandoned after the Briarcliff Manor Center for Rehabilitation and Nursing Care was built nearby. So this facility is in Briarcliff Manor, still in the Westchester area. This is just a grand day room in the former nursing home. Typical resident room within that. And when I talk about finding things left over, that's always one of the surprises I see. This is just attic storage. This is all lamps that were stored up there. Okay. And last stop, or second to last stop, this is Bennett College. It's in the town of Millbrook, New York. This particular building of the college was called Halcyon Hall. It was once a resort hotel built in 1890. In 1907, Miss Bennett's Finishing School for Girls of Irvington, New York, purchased the property. The school would reinvent itself into Bennett College, a 2-year college for women offering fashion design, art, music, modern language, history, dance, and equine studies. With the rising popularity of coeducation in the 1960s and 70s, Bennett College faced retention and enrollment issues before finally closing in 1978. One particular building that I did not go into just because of the structural instability, you can kind of see this part is sort of concaving in. Last stop, Hudson Valley. This is David Abercrombie's Elda estate. So David Abercrombie, the founder of Abercrombie & Fitch, the clothing company, he actually helped build this estate back in 1895. Before he got into clothing manufacturing, he was actually a land surveyor. So finding a spot, this is actually located in Ossining, New York, so finding a spot and constructing this was a lot of his own doing, so he drew upon that experience. And the acronym ELDA, which is what the estate is named after, it's actually an acronym for his 4 children, Elizabeth, Lucy, David, and Abbott. Yep, and you can see just, granite stairway leading up into the house, all overgrown. This was the main living room den area. This is what it looked like back when Abercrombie lived there. Same room, it's just the opposite angle. So this picture was taken standing here and looking towards where this was shot, just to give you an idea. Yeah, it went through several different owners before finally being closed sometime in the late 1990s, early 2000s. This is actually still on the market today for about $3.3 million as is. And I think that's just goes to where it's located. It's Ossining, you know, it's a very high real estate area, you know, with the close proximity to New York City, and also like the story behind it too. Okay, Catskill region. So this is a pretty neat region because you see a lot of remnants of the vacation industry. So the first stop in this region is the Nevele Grand Resort. So I'm sure all of you have seen the movie Dirty Dancing. So you think of like a resort like this, that's what the Nevele once was. It's just a grand hotel, you know, had a ski slope, skating and ice rink, which is what you see here. This ice rink here, these red tubings, that's what actually kept the ice cold back when it was, you know, being used. The word Nevele, which is where the resort gets its name, it dates back to the late 19th century when, according to local lore, 11 school teachers discovered Nevele Falls, which is a hidden waterfall on the property, thus inspiring the name Nevele, which is simply the word 11 spelled backwards. So it opened sometime in 1903, and it closed in early 2009, just from a series of financial issues. Vacation industry in the Catskills was declining a lot by the 1990s, just because airfare was so cheap and popular that people weren't vacationing to the Catskills. They were traveling, you know, much more abroad. But this is so inside the ski and skate chalet here. This was a rental room that I found, which had, you know, a bunch of ice skates, cross-country skis. Pretty neat. But I talk about finding things that are left over when these buildings close. So look at this picture here on the ground. So see all this paperwork here? So that's all rental agreement forms. So imagine if you were to rent a pair of skis or ice skates and you were to fill out a rental form, what information would you put on there? So probably like your name, you know, phone number, address, credit card information. So that's what all that is right there. Yeah, I mean, similar stuff like that. I mean, in some hospitals, I've seen like old patient records. That's just stuff that I just, you know, I'll leave behind. I don't touch it or anything like that. Yeah, it's pretty neat. In some places, you walk into like, I guess, a time capsule in some ways. So, you know, that's why I like to document this, you know, with, you know, photography. You're essentially like telling a story in a way. Yeah. More or less, yeah, yeah. Some places here were actually part of photography tours that I've done. So if they're owned by like an independent company or an owner that's willing to open up the grounds to a group of people, you basically just sign a waiver and you're allowed to, you know, roam about. So one hospital that I'll get to in the presentation was actually part of the tour, which is pretty interesting. So you don't have to, you know, worry about any, you know, issues or anything like that. But yeah. Last photo in the Nevele Grand Resort. This is the Stardust Room. So think of the movie Dirty Dancing where they were doing all the performances. So it was a room like that. This is what it looked like back in the 1950s. So quite a contrast between several decades. This is the Catskill Game Farm. Probably one of the few locations that I have a personal connection to when doing this book. I actually used to visit this spot with my family as a kid growing up a lot. And it was basically the first privately owned zoo in the United States. It was founded in 1933 by Roland Linderman. The zoo grew from a single enclosure with a small variety of deer to a 1,000 acre farm with 2,000 animals from all over the world. Prior to the zoo's closing, Kathy Schultz, the owner of the game farm and daughter of Roland Lindemann, they received several citations during the annual USDA inspections in 2004 and 2005. So they were cited with a lot of issues with the management of the zoo and the conditions of the animal enclosures and whatnot. And coupled with a lot of you know, financial difficulties over the years, it closed in 2006. So this was another, believe it or not, eerie spot that I visited because it was such a fun place to visit as a kid, but then going back as an adult, it actually seemed a lot smaller, revisiting that, and you can kind of see just by some of the pictures what a souvenir shop looked like, all overgrown. Last stop in the Catskill region. This is the Parksville Pharmacy. So the town of Parksville, or the hamlet of Parksville, it was thriving way back during when vacation industry was really popular in the Catskills. It had nearly 50 hotels and inns. Route 17 ran through the town center parallel to Main Street, making Parksville a popular stopover for vacationers. When Route 17 was bypassed to build Interstate 86, traffic was entirely rerouted from the town. So basically, if you drive through Parksville today, it looks like an entire ghost town, just because no one drives through it anymore. So all the businesses had to close, including this pharmacy, which is right on the corner of the Main Street. You can sort of see it when you're taking the thruway through it, or when you're taking 17 through it, rather. Okay, Central New York region. One of the major cities in the Central New York region, you have Utica and you have Amsterdam, just to give an idea of where we are geographically. You see a lot of remains of just various industries. This is Mahasco Powerhouse, which is located in Amsterdam. Water from a local creek was filtered through this powerhouse, and the steam from the powerhouse's boilers powered its turbine generators, which in turn produced electricity for many of Amsterdam's mills. Like many industries served in Amsterdam, the steam efficiencies produced by Mahasco helped grow Mohawk carpets to become a world leader in carpet making. So that's why I chose this particular location for the book. It was also pretty interesting. I like shooting a lot of industrial sites too. This is a staircase in the boiler room of the powerhouse. So bottom of the staircase going up and then shooting down, which is this is the top of the staircase looking down on the left-hand side here. This particular structure, it's actually part of a rail trail in Amsterdam. So if you're in the city and you're going hiking, you can stop by and visit this place. I wouldn't recommend it just because it's, again, a little unstable, but pretty interesting nonetheless. Last stop in Central New York, this is the Charleston USA Outlet Mall. It's in Utica. It opened in 1982. The complex stretched across 30 acres and contained over 50 stores, 2 restaurants, an off-track betting parlor, and it operated until about 1991. Following a massive fire that ripped through this abandoned mall on August 27, 2020, the city of Utica declared a state of emergency out of concern of the weather and wind patterns carrying ash and asbestos particles throughout the city. So after that fire, this is what was left. All right, moving on to Capital Region. So cities of Albany, Troy are here. I talked about the photography tour that I did. I did a tour at this particular structure. Another example of a TB sanatorium. This is Saratoga County Homestead. Opened in 1909 after New York State legislature mandated that every county in New York State open sanatoriums and hospitals to deal with the ongoing tuberculosis crisis, which had reached near epidemic proportions by the end of the 19th century. So what a lot of people don't realize, unless you work in the medical field, is that tuberculosis was essentially the COVID before COVID. And these sanatoriums were essentially isolation hospitals to keep patients suffering from TB, away from the general public, in an attempt to, slow the spread of the disease. Oh, so if you were to walk into the homestead through this front entrance here, either as a patient or a family member visiting, this is one of the first things you would see. It's just a grand staircase which is going up. One of, I guess, my favorite photos that I took for this book. This is all natural light that's coming down. That's because the roof is missing. It's actually right on the stairs here. And just to give you an idea of how big it is, this is a drone shot of the homestead. The main entrance is sort of obscured behind these trees right here. Inside the homestead, this is just a typical medication room, exam room. Okay, so in Albany, this is the central warehouse. It's an 11-story, 508,000 square foot cube-like structure built in 1927, and it served as a refrigerated food storage facility. The steel and concrete design, insulated with cork and cooled with ammonia, was capable of storing enough food to feed all of Albany for several months. So this is what it looks like. It's pretty much an eyesore for the city. So if you're driving, I forget the name of the interstate that runs through the city, but you can see, you can't miss it. It's right by if you're driving north or south. What's that? Not 87. It's I think it's 787. Most were state funded. Some were privately owned, so there was family members did have to pay the bill, depending on where they were and which facility we're talking about. But yeah, most of them were state operated. Okay, Adirondack region. You'll see a lot of remnants of the mining industry here. This is Tahaw's Upper Works. So this is in just outside the town of Newcomb in the Adirondacks. It's basically just the remnants of a mining village at the base of Mount Marcy. So this is when they were mining the area for ore. Miners would stay in these cottages with their families. So this is what's left of that industry there. This structure on the right is a McIntyre blast furnace. Basically, that was built to filter out impurities from the iron ore. Okay. Next spot in the Adirondacks, this is the Lorraine W. Bills Elementary School. This is a photo from one of the classrooms in the school, and it's also the cover photo for the book. And just going away from the presentation a little bit, so when I was working on this book, it was picked up by a publisher in 2020. So when I was compiling the manuscript to submit to the publisher, they asked for several photos from the book to use as cover samples, so they could shoot when they were designing the book. They wanted to select a few that I gave them to use for a possible mock-up. They chose none of the 4 that I submitted them. They actually found this photo that I submitted as part of the manuscript, and they picked that for the cover photo, and they did such a nice job with it, so I couldn't be happier with how it came out. But it's just funny just how that creative process works. This is in Herkimer. Yeah. So yeah, we're still in the Adirondack region. Nothing too interesting about the story behind this school. It's just it's pretty unique in terms of when I say like time capsule, like the stuff left over, and I wanted to include a school of some sort in the book just to make it a little more diverse. But yeah, this particular school was one of 2 schools in the Herkimer Central School District that closed in 1991 after the opening of a newer facility. For years, L.W. Bill's school had been in need of repair, as its high ceilings and antiquated windows were not energy and cost efficient. So, another classroom. This, when I took this back in 2020, I remember like looking through the books, just all textbooks, encyclopedias, National Geographics just left over. Auditorium, gymnasium. Okay. Next stop in the Adirondack region, last stop I should say, this is Mary McClellan Hospital. It's a small, or was a small rural hospital. It's in Cambridge, New York, which is about 40 minutes outside of Albany and Troy, so it's pretty close to the Vermont border. It was named after the founder's mother, and ultimately trends in the delivery of medical care made it difficult for small rural hospitals like Mary McClellan to prosper. So Mary McClellan Hospital would transfer more and more patients to larger urban hospitals throughout the 1990s before closing in 2003. So when I was adventuring here and just doing the photography, one of the first rooms I stumbled upon in the hospital was this. This is a medical library that I found. This this cart with the books and the flag. This was probably staged by someone. I don't stage any of my shots, so when I, am photographing the inside of a building, I like to shoot what I see as I see it. I don't touch anything. I just like to kind of preserve the moment and just preserve it as I see it. So this is how I saw this room when I came to it. And these books, these are just all like medical textbooks, nursing yearbooks, Reader's Digests. The window or the glass on these cabinets are kind of cloudy. That's actually all black mold that's coming in. So a lot of these buildings are exposed to the elements. Yeah. Yeah, no, not a hard hat, but that's, it won't fit my camera bag, but I'll try and wear a mask, like an N95, or some cases, like I have a respirator that I'll wear if I plan on spending like a long period of time in there, just for personal safety and whatnot. Still in Mary McClellan Hospital. This was the inside of the nursing dormitory that was on the grounds. It also served as a nursing school at one point. In fact, when it was, tuition plus room and board for nurses studying at Mary McClellan Hospital was $625 per year. That was probably back sometime in the 1930s, 1940s. And this was a chapel within the hospital. Okay, Thousand Island Seaway region. So this is up, along the Canadian border. You see a lot of remnants of the paper mill industry here. One of my favorite spots that I got to visit doing this project, aside from Seaview Hospital and the like, was Newton Falls Fine Paper Company. And basically it just served as a paper mill. By 1925, there were over 800 residents living in the town of Newton Falls. Many were immigrants that traveled from all over, Canada, Poland, Denmark, Finland, Russia, Norway to find work. And the company basically built Sears homes for the workers to live in as they worked at this mill. And it lost money throughout the early 2000s before finally closing in, I think, 2009. It basically just couldn't keep up with larger paper manufacturers throughout the country. This is one of the processing rooms within the paper mill. It's actually a reflection shot. So this is the ceiling just being reflected. I'm standing about an inch of water when I took this photo. And it was also like a long exposure shot just because there wasn't a whole lot of light. So I think I exposed this photo over the course of probably about 45 seconds. Just to give you an idea of how dark it was. This is one of the main manufacturing rooms within the paper mill. These holes in the floor, that's where massive generators used to be. You can see there's a control room here on the left-hand side. One can only imagine how loud this room actually was back when it was operational. It's an office overseeing one of the processing floors. See, there's some manuals left over. One of the more interesting shots that I got when visiting this place, I came across this room, and I just called it the blueprint room. So all the blueprints for the entire facility, I don't know how many square feet it consists of, but every piece of machinery was documented in here. The layout of each room was all stored in this room. I thought that was probably a pretty unique find for me. Okay, second to last region, that's the Chautauqua-Allegheny region. This is J.N. Adam Memorial Hospital. It's in Perrysburg, New York, which is outside Buffalo, probably about 40 minutes south of Buffalo. It did treat tuberculosis patients back during the 1900s, but then it was reopened as a hospital to treat the developmentally disabled. So it was named after Buffalo Mayor Mayor Adam. James Noble Adam, sorry. It was named after Buffalo Mayor James Noble Adam. So you can see this is the main entrance of the hospital here. Behind this tree there's a dome-shaped structure. Going in, this is what was inside. This was actually the dining room of the hospital, and this ceiling was still intact. Probably one of the most difficult shots I had to take doing this, just because of how the room was constructed. It was almost ovular in nature, so I couldn't get the right framing, with the camera and tripod that I was using. So I got frustrated enough where I just took out my iPhone and shot this. Yeah, and it works. It's actually, I think it's a pretty neat shot. Just sort of documenting what was left. Part of the ceiling is starting to cave in. Okay, last region is the Niagara Frontier region. So the city of Buffalo, Niagara Falls is there. Buffalo Central Terminal was one of the spots that I visited in the Buffalo area. So the New York Central Railroad opened the Buffalo Central Terminal on June 22nd, 1929, just months before the Great Depression. Even though its goal was to replace several lesser stations scattered throughout the city, the 17-storied Art Deco terminal could handle about 200 trains and 10,000 passengers daily. This is just a passenger concourse within the terminal. You can see it's all overgrown. The last passenger train departed Buffalo Central Terminal in October 1979, just 50 years after it opened. And this is the remains of the baggage terminal. Okay, so like I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, this book idea was it came about in 2019, and it was published in 2022. So over the course of 3 years, a lot can happen with the status of some of these buildings. And in fact, I like to think of the photos as part of a preservation effort, in a sense. So I talked about Bennett College, that Tudor-style facility that goes back to the 1800s. It was an all-girls college. This is what the town of Millbrook did to it back in 2021. They're actually building a park there now. So the status of a lot of these places can change, just over the course of a few years. And people like myself, are so fortunate to go and document that, and in some cases turn them into works of fine art. So that's one of the reasons why I like, doing this sort of thing. Newton Falls Paper Company, which I just mentioned, one of my favorite spots that I visited for this project. It's being demolished right now. A friend of mine took these drone shots. No information as to why they're doing away with it. There wasn't a lot of local coverage in the press. They're probably going to build some sort of facility there to replace it. That room with all the blueprints, no idea what happened to it. Yeah, you just don't know. David Abercrombie's Elda, like I said, it's still on the market today. Just last year this happened to it. Someone set it afire. It actually took the local fire department in Ossining a long time to put it out, just because they couldn't find a proper fire hydrant in the area. And then, just an update on Skull Style. Actually, probably to end on a positive note, when I took this back in 2019, this is what it looked like. They actually turned it into a drive-in movie theater. So I kind of like to leave on that note. And you can actually see on the left-hand side there, that street art that gave it its name is still there. So this is what it looks like today. But if that ends the presentation, I will have copies of the book to sign, and they're for purchase along with some prints from the book. So if you're interested in a copy, more than happy to hang out and sign one for you. But any questions about the presentation? I wanted to do one on specifically hospitals, so I've been doing a lot of traveling, not just in New York State, but all over. I was actually in Indiana, Kentucky recently doing some work out there. But, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not an easy place to get to. I don't think there was too much damage done there. From what I saw, it was a pretty small. Yeah. 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 Oh. Yeah, so when I finished the project on Kings Park, I was looking to do more traveling outside of Long Island. So I was sort of just researching spots to visit, and I was keeping everything like on a spreadsheet, just by region, by county, and just to make my traveling a little more efficient. And yeah, I realized when I was doing that, I'm like, wow, like there's actually a lot of similarities in a lot of these places. I'm sure there's part of a greater story. So that's how I came up with the name of the book. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. There's a website I can recommend called Publishers Marketplace. If you go there, I actually found my literary agent through that site. I initially reached out to her for the Kings Park book, but was determined that was a little too niche. She then followed up with me when I started this project. I pitched her the idea, and then a publisher, picked it up during the pandemic. So, I spent a lot of the pandemic, just traveling around New York State, doing this. But yeah. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, just to answer that question, if check out Publishers Marketplace, because you can research different agents, different publishers by the work that they've produced or represented. So in this case, I looked for an agent that specialized in photography books, and that's how I found her. And yeah, so that could be yeah. 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 It was all personally funded, so yeah. So I'm really hoping you guys buy a copy. No, okay. Yeah, but it was more like so. Yeah, it was just like it started off as like a passion project, and then it amounted into something much more. But I am a member of like a local art gallery by me, so I do have my work on display all the time. So prints, framed pieces. I also do like a lot of like local art fairs, art and craft fairs too. So. Yeah. 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 That's something I've been considering too. So I do have a YouTube channel that I've been working on. So I'm actually revisiting a lot of these sites and doing like a video component as well. So. It's just my name. It's John Lazara. If you go to my website, I have a card here. You can find it. So yeah. Yes, sir. Probably back, I say 8 years or so. I think back in 2015, I was working at an independent school. I was working in the marketing department, so a lot of my responsibilities, I had to be like the on-call or on-staff photographer. So I picked up, the craft then, and then, I got into nature photography just because I was living in Maine at the time, so there's a lot of nature there. When I moved back home, that genre got like a little boring to me, and I always had a fascination with abandoned buildings and the history behind a lot of those places. So that's how it came to be. No. I mean, I've always been like a movie buff, and I studied film in college. So I think a lot of the two art forms sort of go hand in hand. You think of like shot composition, storytelling. You can kind of draw some, from the other. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the photography, it's all self-taught. Like I never took a class on, how to, work a camera or stage a shot. It just, I just grew up, being a fan of art, photography, and then I just picked up myself and, yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Yeah, I've been there. Actually, after the book was finished, I mean, had I visited earlier, then that's definitely something I would have included in the book. But yeah, really neat place to go. I was actually there last year, kind of, you know. Okay. Yeah, the prison did close recently. Hmm. Yeah, that's why it's sort of got like a lot more attention from photographers and yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely closed or it's in the process of closing from what I know. Yeah, yeah, it is. Okay, yeah, yeah, you guys would know maybe more than. Oh, yeah. So I use a Canon 5D. Oh, you are. Okay, okay, yeah. So it's all digital. So I use a Canon 5D Mark IV, and I shoot with a tilt shift lens. Not so much for some of these photos that I took in the beginning of the project. I got the lens only probably about a year or two ago, and it's really like a lot of architectural photographers use that just because it's a tilt shift lens. Yeah, 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 yeah. And then I had to have a DJI Mavic Mini for the drone that I use for some of the shots. Yeah. Yes, in the back. Yes. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. I know when I visited for the project, the that the tower was off limits, but the passenger terminals that was a little easier to get to and photograph. So. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. Cool. Any other? Oh, yeah, in the back. Mm. Yeah. So just the best answer I can give is that it comes down to money. So if we look at the example of Kings Park Psychiatric Center, which I mentioned in the presentation, the cost of demolishing that and remediate everything, like all the asbestos, lead paint that's left behind. I mean, that would cost the state of New York probably hundreds of. I've seen figures of $200 to $300 million, and I don't think New York State has the funding to oversee a project like that. So with a lot of these places. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Oh yeah, that's in the book too. Just not in the. I didn't include it in the presentation because yeah, 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 Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so in a lot of cases, it's cheaper to leave the buildings standing than it is to take them down. No, I understand. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like to, think of at least the photos showing not so much our past, but ultimately like where we're going. So, yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like, if you're in a rush to leave somewhere, chances are you leave something behind, and but if you're forced to like, vacate a premises, in some cases, days notice, what do you leave behind? That's yeah, right. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, yeah, it's any other questions before? What's that? Oh, it's 35. Yeah, yeah. I can do a credit card too if that's yeah. So, yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate it.